Elon Musk was a name recognized worldwide. For years, he had fascinated people with his contributions to technology and changed the lives of billions of people with his revolutionary visions of the future. But one morning, an experience that Elon Musk found himself in a completely different world radically changed his perspective. That day, instead of working in his luxurious office in Silicon Valley, the CEO of Tesla would spend the night in a homeless shelter in Los Angeles. Elon had tried many different ways to understand what he wanted to see through the eyes of others in life. But this time, he chose a very different path. One weekend, he was deeply touched by a story he heard by chance. A group of people were struggling with hunger and loneliness on cold concrete, in a world completely different from the warm beds and cozy lives they embraced every night. At that moment, he realized how important it would be for him to experience this world for himself. So Elon decided to go to the largest homeless shelter in Los Angeles, wearing ordinary clothes and a messy hairdo. No one would recognize him and he would spend the night like an ordinary person. He wanted to understand what it means to live in an environment where everything happens naturally, without any outside interference. One way or another, while Elon's life was filled with luxury and comfort day by day, at the end of each night, there was a reality that he could return to, detached from the world around him. Loneliness. When he stepped into the shelter that night, no one realized who he was. As he quickly entered the shelter, he had a deeply tired and thoughtful expression on his face. His long beard, old t-shirt, jeans and disheveled hair made him look like an ordinary homeless person. Like everyone else, he was going to spend a night here. As soon as he stepped inside the shelter, he was greeted not only by cold and gray walls, but also by a set of eyes. Many people were looking at him, but no one was indifferent to him. Elon felt like an ordinary person, like everyone else, but the disturbances inside him were deeper. People just looked at each other, sometimes a glance, sometimes a smile. But at that moment, he really didn't know how to feel. She should not show this night, when she made one of the most important decisions of her life, to anyone. What happened that night at the shelter caused Elon to experience not only a physical but also a spiritual change. Loneliness and poverty had taken a deep hold on Elon. A human being who was noticed among humans attracted too much attention in this world. He needed to exist as a human being. But over time, for many of those people, the only way to survive was to stay together. In their eyes, there was a lost hope and a frustration with this world. People's bonds with each other were much stronger, independent of money and status. Feeling that every single one of them experienced this night taught the biggest lesson next to the power in the entire business world. But the moment Elon will end the night will make him ask the biggest question of his life and at the same time realize the question that remains unanswered. When he entered the shelter to spend the night, Elon Musk had a slight uneasiness inside. Being in a homeless shelter, among all those people cut off from the world, seemed like a feeling that was not foreign to him at all. But this time everything was different. He always had the chance to escape from his environment somehow. There were moments when he knew he could change the world by returning to his luxurious offices and working on revolutionary ideas. But tonight, there, among these people, he had to belong to this world. The first few hours in the shelter were spent observing people. This was a place where all kinds of people came. Many people were here for different reasons. Failures at work, alcohol addiction, family problems, or just bad luck. He did not look at anyone as an outsider, but he also noticed a lot. There was a lostness, a frustration in the eyes of many people. Life had already given up for many of them, but for some there was still a glimmer of hope. As the night progressed, the discomfort in him began to increase. Among the homeless, he was just another human being, not a billionaire spending the night. This was a place where everything was lived in its truest form. He was faced with the harsh face of life. While other people were trying to sleep, Elon fidgeted on his bed. No matter how luxurious a bed he slept in, his respect and empathy for these people who spent the night in the shelter affected him deeply. There were times when he thought everything was perfect in the outside world, but at that moment, here, in this atmosphere, seeing life itself was a completely different feeling. When it was past midnight, there was silence in the shelter. People were sleeping, but Elon's eyes were still open. He was sleepless. In an environment where everyone was sleeping in a corner, very close to each other, he was questioning not only himself but also the life they lived. No one was superior to each other here. There was no one rich, no one famous, no one with power. Everyone was equal and in fact, all these people were interdependent. The help of one helped the other to survive. He had seen this night as an experience, but slowly a change began to take place inside him. He realized that money and success were not what made people human. Survival, having each other, was really more important than anything else. And here, inside the shelter, he felt this feeling. The bonds between people were the greatest strength. They gathered here not only to survive, but also to support each other. At one point, he locked eyes with the old man next to him. The man was quite old, his face was wrinkled and the old clothes he was wearing did not fit his body well. But somehow, he was at peace. Something in his eyes touched Elon deeply. It was as if the man had somehow found an inner peace after all his hardships. There was a kind of confidence in his eyes. At that moment, Elon Musk realized how valuable it is to be not only the richest man in the world, but also a human being. The man turned to Elon and smiled. "Sometimes the hardest times are the times that make you the strongest," he said. At that moment, these simple yet profound words resonated in Elon's heart. He felt how strong he was not only in monetary terms, but as a human being. All his wealth was nothing compared to the one night he spent in this shelter. There was still hope shining in his eyes. And it was strong enough to shake him. During that night, Elon listened to the lives of many people. Each one had a different story. But they all had one thing in common: hope. Each of them had somehow managed to survive, even after going through the most difficult periods of their lives. And some of them realized that the only way to overcome these difficulties was to help others. The night dragged on for hours. Elon thought quietly. It was human nature to help, to share, to be strong together. But it was not only about helping others. It was also about helping oneself. And in that moment, Elon Musk learned the biggest lesson of his life. The next morning, with the first lights coming into the shelter, Elon Musk opened his eyes. As much as he had not been able to sleep during the night and had an internal struggle, he had also experienced a kind of enlightenment. The peace inside him was very different from the dark thoughts of last night. Yes, this was a difficult place, but somehow, a light had started to burn in his heart. Everyone's hardships and support for each other showed him true success and strength in life. Now, he was a little different from the old Elon Musk. Beyond being a billionaire, he had learnt something about humanity. As he left the shelter, he locked eyes with the old man. The man smiled at him. It was not a smile that only two people could share. He offered the most precious thing that one person could give to another: hope. And in that moment, Elon realized the great change in himself. He slowly walked towards the old man and took his jacket out of his pocket and handed it to him. "Someone like you needs something warm," he said. While the man looked surprised, Elon placed his jacket in his hands. A few tears fell from his eyes as he accepted the jacket. "Thank you," the man said. "Sometimes, knowing that someone sees you is enough to survive." Elon paused for a moment. At that moment, he thought how temporary all his wealth, luxury cars, companies were. Survival and caring for each other were more important than anything else. That night was a turning point for him. Yes, there were still projects to change the world, but he had learnt that you have to care about people first. When he left the shelter, there was a warmth inside Elon. He began to feel himself not just as an entrepreneur or a rich person, but as a human being. His experience that night at the homeless shelter would remain one of the most precious memories of his life. Because there, he learnt what it means to be truly human. Over time, Elon Musk recognized that night as a jumping-off point. It had left such a deep mark that he had a great passion for helping not only big projects, but also every individual in the world. He began to participate in social responsibility projects, to convey to people the spiritual values that were much more important than the material values in his life. Many years later, Elon's name would still be remembered in the world of technology, and he would continue to carry out projects around the world. But for him, there was only one thing he learnt that night in the shelter. True wealth was helping and connecting with people. This change affected not only his life but also the lives of those around him. This small but profound change that started in that shelter eventually turned into a worldwide good deed, causing everyone to remember to be a little more compassionate and human. This was her real revolution. And this revolution began to change the world.